The story begins with a turtle, slowly crawling on the ground. Out of nowhere, a boy walks up, his eyes fixed on it. But this wasn't just any boy. His talent was unlike anyone else's. He picked up the turtle, its little legs waving helplessly. Now, here's the strange part. This boy couldn't feel nauseous from overeating. And poison? Completely useless against him. That's when he did something shocking. He cut off the turtle's head and started chewing it. I'm not kidding. Chunks of its head were coming out from between his teeth, and its blood spilled onto the ground, staining his face. It was clear that this kid knew exactly how to exploit his bizarre abilities. A few moments later, we see him sitting inside a house, thinking about going to Africa to become a poacher. He's holding a hunting rifle, already dreaming of his next target. That's when another man walks in and tells him it's time to go to work. This was Edward, a fellow poacher, and his colleague. Edward explained that the Lightning General had given them a mission: catch a gorilla. And here's the twist. They didn't even need the whole animal, just the head and the hands. The head was for decoration, and the hands? An ashtray. Honestly, who even thinks of stuff like this? The plan was set, and they decided to leave the next morning. Soon, the sun rose over the forest, and the two were making their way down a narrow path. Kim, our boy from earlier, kept imagining the dangers ahead. Rival poachers with better weapons, soldiers guarding the jungle, and the military, who were a threat to both sides. If a poacher crossed paths with the army, there was only one option: run. But something felt off to Kim. He kept asking Edward if they were going the right way. Edward insisted they were, until, out of nowhere, they were surrounded by armed men in black uniforms. Edward flashed an ID, revealing himself as a special international police officer. He even called Kim by his nickname, Pet Shop. Kim was stunned. Not only did Edward speak Korean, he also spoke multiple languages from all the countries Kim had traveled to. And then, click, Edward slapped handcuffs on him, listing his crimes: murder, poaching, smuggling, fraud, drug trafficking. Basically, if it was illegal, Kim had probably done it. Turns out this entire mission had been a setup. Edward had been tracking Kim for months, slowly gaining his trust. And now, Kim was being taken away in a police van. Everything seemed fine until Edward noticed something strange about the ride. Kim's body started changing. His skin formed a scaly pattern, his mouth grew rows of sharp, shark-like teeth, and his clothes began to tear. This man wasn't just immune to poison. He could transform his entire body. And it made sense, because Kim had eaten rare animals from all over the world, taking their strength for himself. What happened next was pure chaos. With inhuman claws, Kim tore through the armed officers. Blood splattered against the walls of the van. His size grew, his face no longer human. The officers opened fire, but it didn't matter. Kim was a monster now, the kind you'd hear about in dark hunting legends. The van crashed into a tree, and Kim stepped out, returning to his human form. He looked at the sky, remembering past hunts, from polar bears in the north to penguins in the south. To him, killing rare creatures was just part of life. But before he could even relax, a pack of wolves surrounded him. Usually, animals can sense when to stay away from danger, but these wolves clearly hadn't gotten the memo. Their leader, marked with a red cross on his nose, led the charge. Kim transformed again, this time into a tiger-like beast. The wolves hesitated, but the leader refused to back down. In one brutal move, Kim grabbed him, slammed him to the ground, and broke his spine. Blood dripped from the wolf's mouth as the rest of the pack scattered in fear. Holding the lifeless leader, Kim thought, "I haven't eaten in a while. This will be my first delicacy in this world." But there was a problem. The wolf's hide was too tough. Even tiger teeth couldn't pierce it. And so, he began to change form once again. After tearing through the wolf leader, Kim decided to change form again, this time into a hippopotamus, but with sharp teeth lining his mouth, a terrifying mix. A few minutes later, he shifted back to human form, wiping the blood from his lips. He realized something. If he'd combined a hippo's mouth with shark teeth earlier, ripping through a wolf's hide would have been a lot easier. He remembered the roar he had unleashed at the wolves, a sound meant to paralyze prey, something that in the animal kingdom could freeze muscles instantly. But in this world, even the leader of the pack had stood firm. Strange,
The wolves had pounced on him despite his size, resisting in ways that didn't make sense to him.
Raising his gaze to the sky, where two strange shapes still floated like clouds, he wondered, does logic even work here? He scraped the last bits of meat from the wolf's bones and tossed them aside into the cave. Inside, the pile of bones was already growing into a mountain. It had been a week since his first meal here. In that time, he'd hunted a bear with massive paws, a snake whose venom status was unknown, and a deer with horns sharp enough to stab through armor. Each kill had added to his growing arsenal of abilities. Pushing through dense bushes, he realized something important. This world had its own strange logic, and it definitely wasn't the same as Earth's. His body was slowly covering with a layer of gray fur, and he decided it was time to explore and learn more about this place. But before he could set out, a sound broke his thoughts. From behind the bushes stepped a boy. Human. Kim studied him like a predator sizing up prey. So there are humans here. Maybe I can get some answers. Kim placed his massive paw on the boy's shoulder. The sight was unsettling, a human hand fused with an animal's paw. From experience, Kim knew there were limits to his transformations. He could only graft body parts that matched in structure. A bear's paw could replace a human hand, but a crocodile's jaw couldn't replace a human mouth. Creatures with completely different anatomy, like lobsters or centipedes, were useless. And bird heads? They might give him sight or a beak, but he'd never be able to speak through them like a human. Right now, Kim still had the wolf's body and the bird's head stored within his transformations. Without warning, he hoisted the stranger onto his shoulder. The boy froze in fear, but somehow managed to escape, only to run straight into a deer with razor antlers. The deer stabbed him through the stomach, leaving him bleeding out on the ground. Kim stood over him silently. The language was different, and even if he saved the boy, communication would be impossible. And frankly, Kim didn't want to save him. Information is what he needed, and the dead were much easier to read. The wolf's brain had been large, and with Kim's ability, eating it had allowed him to extract memories. He planned to do the same here. Afterward, he dressed in the boy's clothes and studied his belongings, learning the language of this world. Among the items was a purple book with green stripes, but its real treasure was something else, an encyclopedia of monsters. Each page contained photos and detailed descriptions, like the hard wolf, standing 6'5" and weighing 265 pounds, with abilities in biting and roaring. This book was a goldmine. It told him what kinds of creatures existed here, how the system worked, and possibly how he could achieve the dream he'd left behind on Earth. 2 months later, Kim stood before a green-faced monster, a troll. Its long fangs were bared, but its head was severed lying on a stump. He'd destroyed its brain, but strangely, a month later, the creature had regenerated. That wasn't in the book. Kim examined the body closely, intrigued. Then he heard a low growl. The troll's head was still making sounds. Kim's eyes lit up. This monster was awake, and it was fascinating. His mind raced. How long would it take to burn off its skin? Could it resist poison? How many times could it revive? So many questions, and now so many experiments to try. In his mind, he was already declaring himself the most powerful being in this world. Far away, in a shadowed place, a red-hooded monster sat before a man and asked, "Are you a warrior?" The man, armed with a weapon on his back, replied with a prophecy. "A monarch will be born in the endless forest. It will devour everything, grow stronger, and refine its abilities." Back in the forest, Kim was about to eat the troll's head when heavy footsteps approached. Troll territory. One spotted footprints on the ground. Human footprints. "Someone's keeping these tasty humans all to themselves," the leader growled to his guards. "Find them before only bones are left." The trolls entered Kim's cave. "I smell human here," one said. Another hesitated, saying she felt uneasy, but the leader ignored her. Then his nose caught something else. "That's the smell of our blood," he whispered, fear dripping from his voice. From the shadows, a massive, wolf-headed monster emerged. The leader had barely time to raise his club before Kim's claws crushed him. Kim wondered, what if he combined the troll's muscle with a bear's paw?
Would it create a new level of power? But before he could think further, one of the trolls charged at him in a rage. With a quick slash, Kim severed its hand. The others froze in horror, beginning to back away. Kim lunged, his head morphing into that of a snake, his fangs sinking deep into the troll's flesh. Venom spread instantly. The troll didn't even have time to scream.
So, immobilization, yeah, that's the best move here. And Kim proves it by literally sinking his teeth into the troll, leaving deep bite marks. The troll, barely able to react, collapses unconscious. The only other troll nearby just stares at Kim, wide-eyed with fear. Then things get even crazier. Kim starts shifting from his wolf form into a troll. You can imagine how terrifying that must have looked. The Crush leader tries to order the troll to run, but the poor thing is frozen in place. Kim's muscles bulge and shift until his head looks exactly like a troll's. And then he casually asks, "Do you want to meet your friends?" At that moment, the troll's eyes go wide, purple blood dripping onto the ground. Inside Kim's cave, other troll heads sit as grim trophies, watching in silence. For months, Kim's been running all sorts of poison experiments. One unlucky subject even begged him to end it, but Kim wasn't done yet. He flips through a purple-covered book, the Encyclopedia of Monsters, and his favorite section, Abilities. He imagines himself in a game, fighting enemies, just like he's read before. At first, he thought it was just like a game manual, but no, it's real. In this world, he can use the abilities of the animals he eats. That's the actual system here. One experiment taught him something huge. He once injected venom while holding a snake's head, learning that a poisonous bite can completely immobilize an enemy. The bite marks faded, but the effect stuck in his mind. And it doesn't just work on animals. If it's a creature with an ability, the same logic applies. He even tested it by letting a viper bite a bear's paw. And sure enough, the poison worked. Then he remembers his fight with the wolf, the cry it used against him. Kim realized it worked because he wasn't originally from this world, but a tiger. The locals here? They're vulnerable to his attacks. That thought makes him grin. In this place, he could become the most powerful creature alive. But there's a catch. Back in his old world, no matter how many animals he absorbed, humans with their guns, tanks, and science would always be superior. Here, though, things are different. There's no tech that can overpower a creature's raw abilities. Sure, there are powerful monsters here that could threaten humans, but no nukes, no modern weapons. And Kim? He's had one dream since childhood, to become the world's strongest creature. Looking at the troll's face, he decides he's going to make it happen. All he has to do is eat. He pictures an ogre, then a dragon, the kind of dragon that could melt steel with its fire. One massive shadow sweeps over the forest, and he's in awe. But then something weird catches his attention. A small jelly-like green creature with eyes. A slime. Turns out that boy was the slime in his previous life, now reborn in human form. He tells himself that it's a sign from God. He has to become the strongest in this world. But he doubts himself for a moment, then opens a status window. Species. Slime. With 0 intelligence, but a deadly skill. He can consume creatures and copy their abilities. When a snake slithers by, the slime grows in size and devours it instantly. The system message pops up. Fatal bite. Unlocked. With an immobilizing poison. But there's a downside. His spirit stat drops. He tries to ignore it, focusing on absorbing more animals to restore himself. He thinks, I'm the main character here. But reality is cruel. This power comes at a cost. It eats away at his soul. One day, it'll kill him. It turns out the goddesses of Elmwood didn't choose him to be a hero, he's just a disposable pawn. Meanwhile, on another part of the continent, a cloaked warrior stands ready, blessed by the goddess to protect humanity. The greater the danger, the more power the goddess gives. But even he couldn't stop the monster. The thing's attack devastates the land, and the warrior dies brutally. When he wakes up, he's 10 years in the past. The goddess calls this his last chance. He vows to stop the monster. In a meeting with elders, they discuss a terrifying prophecy. A monster will be born that can absorb every ability it encounters. The elder even notes how troll numbers have been dropping, suggesting the creature wants their regenerative powers. Hearing this, the warrior clenches his fist. This time, he'll win. Back in Kim's world, he turns the pages of his blood-stained book, muttering that only one test subject remains alive. The poor creature stands in the middle of a bloody room, barely clinging to life. and begs for death. Kim agrees, torch in hand, and sends it to the next world, while the other bodies burn in the flames. He had just finished burning the bodies of monarchs he'd once been emotionally connected to. A grim farewell, but necessary.
Now it was time to move on. New targets, new samples to collect. And that's when we see this troll carrying fire toward his own head, strangely calm. Kim just looked at him and basically said that he'd do as the troll wished. He'd kill him. But here's the twist. Death didn't come. Instead, Kim opened a book and discovered something unsettling. Turns out if you drain every last drop of a troll's blood, you can make a powerful restorative potion from it. And just like that, the troll, who had been bracing for sweet release, realized his suffering wasn't over. He even cried. I mean, imagine thinking you're about to be put out of your misery, and then, nope, Kim told him flat out that he'd have to live a bit longer. Then Kim squeezed the blood out of the troll's head, yes, the head, and started boiling it for his experiment. The troll, drained and furious, muttered curses and basically told him to just finish the job already. But Kim wasn't listening. He was busy reading more from the monster guidebook. That's when he spotted a fascinating creature, the Great Forest Lizard Man. Average height, 180 centimeters. Weight, 85 kilograms. Abilities, poison immunity, underwater breathing, high-speed swimming, and physical attack weakening. Independent, human-like, but the moment they see strangers, they go full murder mode. Kim smiled, saying he might need them. And sure enough, we cut to the Danes Forest, where a group of lizard men were hunting. They spot a shadow, maybe a troll? One of them hadn't seen a troll in ages. Another picks up his weapon, calling the intruder a filthy beast for entering their territory. But before he can even finish the threat, his companion is suddenly flung past him. When he turns around, what he sees is nightmare fuel, a monster with a snake-like head and a troll-like body. It grabs his neck and in the blink of an eye, swallows him whole. The third lizard man is frozen in fear. What would you even do here? Run? Fight? He quickly realizes if this thing isn't stopped, their whole race could be wiped out. So he attacks with his spear, landing a hit on the monster's shoulder, only to watch the wound instantly heal. Regeneration. Troll skills. Before he can react, Kim bites him, yes, actually bites him, sending venom straight into his eyes. The lizard man stumbles, momentarily blinded, wondering if it's poison, but he's supposed to be immune to poison. And then everything goes dark. Kim drags his unconscious body back to his cave, saving him as future food. Meanwhile, in the slime forest, a certain slime is busy devouring everything in its path. He swallows an orc in one gulp, spits out the bones, and keeps going. But he's annoyed. Even after eating the orc, all he gets is one measly level. Then he smells blood. And not just any blood. It's coming from a cave. Curious, he uses his detection skills and finds a feast. Inside the cave, there are multiple dead lizard men. The slime is thrilled. So many experience points. This is like hitting the jackpot. He doesn't know who killed them, but he's not complaining. After devouring the corpses, the system rewards him with new skills: underwater breathing, poison immunity, and fast regeneration. Honestly, this guy's having the time of his life. But he doesn't realize someone's watching him. Enter the hero, blessed by the goddesses, sent to free the forest from monsters. He approaches, and the slime immediately notices, asking who he is. The hero hesitates. He was tracking a troll, but this strange aura led him here instead. He thinks it's just a slime, but something feels off. The slime gets irritated. "Hey, I'm talking to you. Who are you?" When the hero doesn't answer, the slime gets more aggressive. The hero, meanwhile, feels pure evil radiating from this creature. Finally, he admits he's a warrior. Now, the slime finds this hilarious. A warrior. What a weird title. Guess you're just another main character wannabe. Perfect for me to level up. He even mocks the hero, saying if he's a warrior, he must have the goddess's blessing. Then he goes too far, insulting the goddesses themselves. Yeah, not a smart move. The hero had been calm until now, but when the slime disrespects the very goddesses who gave him his purpose, he snaps. He draws his sword, promising to shut the slime up for good. The slime, a bit confused by the sudden seriousness, still taunts him, even thinking about what rank he'll get after killing the hero and how he'll absorb all his skills. This
catches the hero off guard, absorbs skills. That's terrifying. Before he can dwell on it, the slime charges, but the hero's ready, cutting into him with his blade as the clash finally begins.
The hero's blade stopped mid-swing. The slime was sliced clean in two. Wasting no time, the hero cast a sealing spell, burning the edges of the cut so they couldn't reattach. He figured, that's it. No recovery now. And honestly, it made sense. How do you come back from being cut in half and cauterized? But then, the slime let out an enraged scream. Fine, I'll end this here. And he shouted his skill, fast regeneration. Oh yeah, the troll's skill. And just like that, the pieces of his body began knitting themselves back together in seconds. Fully restored, the slime laughed in pure joy. Wow, this troll ability is broken. It's like a cheat code. The hero stared in disbelief, even missing entire body parts. The slime still regenerated. And then it hit him. This is the disaster the prophecy warned about. That was enough for him to decide, no more holding back. He buried his sword into the ground, shouting, "Die right here, monster of destruction!" The slime, caught off guard, tilted his head. Monster of what? What do you even? But he never finished. The hero raised his sword high, channeling his most devastating skill, the greatest judgment. A pillar of light came crashing down, ripping the slime's body apart into tiny, brittle fragments. His form dried, cracked, and he writhed in agony in the epicenter of the blast. Meanwhile, somewhere else in the endless forest, Mr. Kim was conducting his experiments. Something strange had happened recently. Before, when he absorbed animals, he couldn't speak using their heads, but after accidentally capturing and absorbing a lizard man, he could. Now, with the reptilian head on his body, he had speech. A hybrid of mammal and reptile, he muttered. Intrigued. Fascinating. After dragging the corpses of cannibals back to his cave, he returned to the swamps in search of new prey. And wouldn't you know it, there were new warriors patrolling the area. Perfect test subjects. While on patrol, a lizard man noticed movement in the brush. The shape was familiar, almost like one of their own. Nervously, he asked, "Is that another lizard man?" His squad mate didn't hesitate. "Idiot! That's no ally! Kill it! Don't let it escape!" Both lunged with spears. But Mr. Kim didn't flinch. Instead, he coated his hands in venom. In a flash, he grabbed one lizard man's head and slammed the poison straight into his eyes. The victim collapsed, unconscious. Seeing their comrade drop so quickly, the others panicked. But their leader barked, "Attack together!" They charged, and both got a face full of the same venom, crumpling instantly. Only one lizard man remained, trembling, unsure whether to flee or fight. His fear paralyzed him, which made it easy for Mr. Kim to grab him by the throat and drag him into the cave for later experiments. Back in another corner of the endless forest, the hero stood over the battlefield, convinced the slime was gone for good. He sheathed his sword, muttering, "It's over." Confident in his victory, he walked away without checking the remains. That was a mistake. Seconds later, the slime fell from the sky, badly injured, but alive. He'd landed near a cave he'd feasted in before. Crawling inside, he muttered weakly, "Dangerous. I need to recover." His regeneration was slow, and he needed food, badly. Rage bubbled inside him as he vowed, "One day I'll make that so-called hero watch as I crush his goddesses before his eyes." Then, footsteps. A boy entered the cave, muttering that it was empty. But this wasn't an ordinary boy. It was Mr. Kim. The slime's eyes lit up with hunger. Food has arrived. Without hesitation, he launched himself at Kim, hoping to devour him and restore his strength. But here's the twist. This isn't just some monster encounter. We flash back to the slime's origin. Once, he was just a human, a lazy hermit living in a filthy apartment, surrounded by snacks, soda cans, and roaches. His life revolved around TV, games, and instant food. Work? Nah. Effort? Never. His parents constantly scolded him for being unemployed at 40, overweight, and aimless. One day, after another shouting match, he threw his controller down, yelled something about not asking for poor parents, and collapsed onto his bed. He wished his life would change on its own. It did, just not in the way he expected. He woke up in a new world, as the strongest slime imaginable.
He remembered his favorite anime about a reincarnated slime who became the most powerful being alive and thought, this is it, my fantasy. I'll be the chosen master of this world. But in the present, his body was a wreck. Still, he brushed it off. Just another main character trial. I'll absorb every skill in this world and take revenge. Then, he heard Kim's voice. Kim looked at him with disgust. What the hell is this thing? How did something this revolting get into my home? The slime didn't care. He leapt at Kim, eager for the feast, even thinking he'd eat Kim from the inside. Kim swallowed him, but something felt off. Back in his lab, Kim realized the cave was ruined, contaminated by the slime's intrusion, reeking of decay.
That smell? The sign that this little encounter was about to turn into something much bigger. Now that the dust is settled, let me tell you about one of the most interesting moments so far. The time a slime went after Mr. Kim and completely lost. Well, lost might be an understatement. He didn't just beat it, he killed it. Actually, to be more accurate, there wasn't even a fight. Mr. Kim simply absorbed it. Yeah, not the most dramatic battle scene, but here's where it gets interesting. This slime wasn't just any random blob, it came with skills. In the handbook Mr. Kim found, it said that slimes can evolve into literally anything. Whatever they absorb, they can imitate. And their diet? Oh, it's crazy. They can eat warts, pests, poisonous plants, dirt, even minerals. Now here's the kicker. If a slime starts eating only minerals, it transforms into something called a metal slime. The name sounds like a video game boss, right? Skills like metallization, metal detection, and mining all come into play. At first, Mr. Kim couldn't really make use of the minerals he consumed. His body just tossed them out as waste. But now, after absorbing the slime, he could eat metals and use them to strengthen his body. That's a pretty insane power-up. Meanwhile, far away in the land of drags, a massive rocky hill hid a cave, the nest of a mighty dragon. This dragon had subjects who admired and even worshipped her, though interestingly, she had no name. She said a noble dragon who lives alone doesn't need one. Still, her subjects gave her one so they could honor her. One day, when the dragon returned home, her child, a young dragon named Red Flash, the one who dances in the sky, was waiting. She looked at him proudly and greeted him, rubbing noses in a tender moment. Lizard men from the forest often brought her jewelry as offerings, hoping for her protection. But ever since Red Flash was born, the dragon's attention was almost entirely on her child. That didn't mean she ignored the outside world, though. Sometimes she would patrol the forest just to make sure nothing suspicious was going on, and on one of those patrols, she spotted blood on the ground and footprints leading somewhere unknown. A confrontation, she wondered. Is there someone trespassing in my territory? She was furious. The next moment, her roar echoed through the forest. A warning to all, the Red Flash was on the hunt. Back with Mr. Kim, he was still experimenting with his new slime powers. His hand had transformed into something like a lizardman's claw, with scales that were tough, though still weaker than a hard wolf's hide. But the real game changer? The slime's mucus. This stuff wasn't just gross, it worked like an antibiotic, a disinfectant, and an ointment all in once. And it wasn't just one type, it was a multi-layered mix that made it even more adaptive. Mr. Kim realized if he could absorb enough metal, he could take on a metal slime form and become even stronger. The problem was, where could he find pure iron? So he activated his eagle-eyed skill, scanning the surroundings from a mountaintop. That's when he spotted a group of orcs mining in the distance. Time for a quick handbook check. These orcs, known as onyx orcs, were no joke. Average height 210 centimeters, weight 150 kilograms, incredible survival and combat skills, and a tribe that values honor above everything else. Oh, and they're classified as rare, sinister monsters. Just your everyday stroll-in-the-park enemies, right? Mr. Kim counted around 40 of them and muttered to himself that even for him, that was quite a handful. As he was planning how to get the minerals he needed, something huge flew overhead, a dragon. He immediately remembered the memories he'd inherited from the lizard man he'd consumed. The dragon was currently raising its child. Using his skill, Mr. Kim could read parts of a creature's mind, but never the whole thing, or he risked losing his sanity.
From what he'd learned, the dragon was extremely protective of its child. Mr. Kim smirked, thinking this could work in his favor. Meanwhile, the dragon returned from hunting and dropped a wolf carcass onto a pile of prey in her nest. She told her child to stay put until she returned, making him promise not to leave. Then she checked the magical barrier protecting her home before flying off. But she hadn't been gone long when a figure began approaching the nest. Let's rewind a little. About half an hour earlier, Mr. Kim had reached the rocky hill with the massive hole. Thanks to the lizardman memories, he already knew it was the dragon's nest. After confirming the location, he tossed a test object at the magical barrier. It sizzled and bounced off exactly like he had expected. When he tried touching it himself, though, his hand went right through. Turns out, the barrier didn't affect him at all. With a sly grin, Mr. Kim slipped inside the nest.
And now, back to the present. Someone inside the nest spotted a red-scaled hand entering and froze in fear. They quickly realized this wasn't anyone they knew. The nest had been infiltrated. So here's where things take a turn from adventurer's journey to, oh wow, Mr. Kim is a full-blown menace. Up in the dragon's nest, the young dragon froze in fear. Mr. Kim, or at least something that looked like a nightmare cobbled together from several monsters, was standing right there. He'd combined the troll's fangs, the scales of a fatal bite, and parts from other creatures so convincingly that at first glance, you might actually think a troll had wandered in. The young dragon blinked, completely confused. "Who are you?" it asked. Mr. Kim stuttered for a second, as if even he wasn't sure how to answer. Then his eyes drifted to the treasure piled behind the dragon. His jaw practically dropped. "That's a lot of unclaimed loot." The dragon snapped at him, voice sharp. "Get out! This is our home!" But Mr. Kim didn't even acknowledge it. He just started walking toward the pile of jewelry. Picking up a silver anklet, he muttered, "This is interesting." That was it. The dragon had had enough of being ignored. Roaring with rage, it lunged at him, only for Mr. Kim to grab it by the neck mid-charge. "You are loud," he said flatly, and then, with casual strength, he hurled the dragon against the wall. The impact thundered through the cavern. The young dragon's body slumped, struggling to stay conscious. "Mom," it whispered weakly, "come quickly." A week earlier, the mother dragon had left the nest to patrol her territory. She'd trusted the magical barrier to protect her child. But when she finally returned, after 7 days, landing at the cliffside entrance, she immediately felt something was wrong. Normally, her child would rush to greet her, but the cave was silent. She stepped deeper inside and froze. Her child was lying crumpled against the wall, wounded and trembling. Panic shot through her. She rushed to heal him, pouring out every healing spell she had, again and again. Finally, the little dragon's eyes opened. He clung to her head, crying, "Mother!" "It's okay now," she whispered. "You're safe." But her tone turned cold. "Tell me, who did this?" Still sniffling, the child described him. "There was a boy with big teeth and red skin. He hurt me. Then he took your shiny things and all our food." At that, the dragon's pupils narrowed to slits. "Big teeth, red skin," she hissed. "Irks." Her rage in her voice was almost physical. "You touched my child, I'll send you straight to the deepest part of hell." Her roar ripped through the forest. Meanwhile, in an orc village, chaos was already brewing. One orc burst into the chief's tent, clutching a dagger. "We found this in the bushes near the village," he said. The chief examined it, sniffed it, and froze. "This smells like dragon's blood." He didn't get another word out. The roof of the tent exploded inward as a massive shadow blotted out the sun. The mother dragon had arrived, and she wasn't here to talk. "Now, you vile creatures, you'll pay!" she roared. Fire engulfed the village. The chief was the first to fall, the dagger still clutched in his hand. With each inhale, the dragon smelled it again. Her child's blood. "It was you," she snarled. Her firestorm lasted for hours.
The orcs fought back with everything they had. The battle raged for 4 days and nights. In the end, the orcs technically won, but only 15 out of the original 40 survived. The rest left the forest entirely. And in the middle of it all, Mr. Kim was having the best week of his life. He now had dragon loot, rare materials, and 24 orc corpses to absorb. A personal feast. Back in the dragon's nest, the young one stood shakily. "Mother," he whispered, "I can't feel them anymore. I don't feel anything." The mother held him close, tears sliding down her face. Then, silently, she wiped them away. She would survive. She would grow stronger. And when she spread her wings and took to the skies again, there was a new resolve in her voice. It's time to decide our next move. By now, Mr. Kim had already eaten his way through the forest's monster roster. Hard wolves, trolls, lizard men, orcs, and yes, even a dragon, thanks to the chaos he engineered. Everything he'd learned was nicely cataloged in his handbook. So, riding in a merchant's cart toward the city, he figured his work was done here. The merchant, an old man who had picked him up from the edge of the endless forest, spoke about its dangers. Ancient treasures, rare herbs that could restore youth, and legendary beasts hiding within. Most who entered never came out alive. But Mr. Kim just nodded politely, pretending to be humbled. "Yes, uncle, you're right. I'll be more careful now." Of course, that was a lie.
Inside, he was already planning his next hunt. There was just one thing still bugging him, the so-called status window that everyone seemed to know about. In this world, it was the way to check a person's identity and condition, and for some reason, Mr. Kim didn't have one. The moment Mr. Kim first heard about the status window ability, his curiosity lit up like a flare. "Is it something like that?" he muttered, already wanting to test it. "Open status window," he commanded. Nothing happened. No glowing text, no pop-up, just silence. He frowned. Maybe the features simply didn't exist for him. The most likely reason, he thought, was that he was still linked to Earth somehow, and the laws of this world didn't quite apply to him. Hours later, after some quiet traveling, Mr. Kim and the kindly old merchant reached the main gates of a sprawling city. The merchant pulled the cart to a stop. "Well, that's it," he said cheerfully. "Our paths split here. Take care of yourself." Before Mr. Kim could say much, the man had already disappeared into the crowd. Standing alone at the entrance, Mr. Kim looked up at the towering gates. "Santo Canalgo City," he murmured. It's bigger than I expected." He wandered the streets, taking it all in. Something struck him almost immediately. The place was spotless. Not just clean, but unnaturally so. No litter, no stains. The cobblestones looked freshly scrubbed. It was almost unsettling. A poster on a nearby wall caught his eye. "Follow the rules of personal hand hygiene to avoid infectious diseases." Mr. Kim raised an eyebrow. Hygiene campaigns here? Behind him, a group of locals chatted as they walked. "This city is amazingly clean, isn't it?" one said. "The whole kingdom's not like this, only here." That's because the second prince grew up in this city. He was the first to understand the connection between hygiene and disease, and he was just 10 years old at the time. Hearing that, Mr. Kim slowed his steps. 10 years old? And talking about germ theory in a medieval world? Something didn't add up. This isn't normal, he thought. Someone else must be involved. Someone like me. He glanced at the sky, muttering, "There's another one here." And indeed, there was. The talented second prince, the boy responsible for introducing hygiene to an entire kingdom, was someone Mr. Kim knew all too well. Their meeting was almost cinematic. The prince had just stepped into a small pet shop when he froze in horror. Standing there with a smirk that could curdle milk was Mr. Kim. "A familiar face," Kim said softly. "Nice to see you in this strange world." The prince's eyes widened. He knew this man. This was no ordinary criminal.
This was the criminal he had once captured in his past life, the man responsible for his death. How did you get here?" the prince stammered. Prince Edward's past life. Once, his name was Eddie Montoya, a UN special investigator and a CIA agent. Born in the United States to immigrant parents, he had lived a high-class, dangerous life hunting some of the world's most dangerous men. And then, he met one, Mr. Kim. Their final encounter ended with Eddie's brutal death. But fate wasn't done with him. He awoke in a new body, that of Edward, the second prince of the Grand Kingdom. This time, life handed him power on a silver platter. His modern knowledge, hygiene, science, politics, even astronomy, became weapons in a medieval world. His charm and intellect won the people's hearts. The throne was practically within reach. But his peaceful second life shattered the night Mr. Kim reappeared. It happened like this. Edward was returning from an evening walk, exhausted. He collapsed onto his bed, only to hear a strange scratching sound in the courtyard. A monster crawled through his window. A lizard man. Edward grabbed a sword. "How did you cross the barrier?" The creature grinned. "So, we meet again. How many years has it been?" Edward's blood ran cold. He knew that voice. The lizard man shifted, skin melting away, revealing the face of Mr. Kim. Recognition hit like a blade to the gut. No, it can't be. Edward's body shook. He told himself it was a nightmare, that he'd wake up any moment. But then came the blackouts, the dizziness, the foam at his mouth. He collapsed. Moments later, the door creaked open. A servant boy stepped inside. "Your Highness," he whispered. He spotted a large teddy bear sitting near the bed. Odd. He didn't remember that being there. He started to walk away, then pulled a dagger from his pocket and crept toward the unconscious prince. "Are you sure you're asleep?" "Well, then die, Prince Edward." But before he could strike, the stuffed bear moved. A paw clamped around his wrist.
The bear spoke in a deep, human voice. "It's not your time to die, Edward, but your time has come." Screams followed. The guards burst into the room. What they found inside would only deepen the mystery. One of the guards suddenly froze, eyes wide, and blurted out in panic, wondering what monster had made it into the prince's room. Had it slipped past their defenses without anyone noticing? Inside, the culprit who ruined the silent entry was already exposed, and the leader wasted no time barking out orders. The plan was activated immediately. In an instant, soldiers swarmed toward a strange glowing berry, clearly intending to eliminate both the intruder and the prince's would-be assassin in one move. No one was to escape. Seeing the man who had just tried to kill the prince, Mr. Kim quickly pieced it together. The whole company must be in on this plot. Without wasting a single second, he scooped Edward up and vaulted out of the window. The landing was rough, especially for Edward, who went face first into the ground. As they fled, Mr. Kim muttered that at least the prince was still alive, for now. Back in the wrecked room, one of the 3 surviving guards rushed to the butler, pale with fear, and reported that a great disaster had struck. The moment the butler opened the door, he demanded to know what had happened. The trembling guard explained that an unknown man had kidnapped the prince. The butler's temper exploded. In the heart of Santo Canergo, such an act was unthinkable. He snapped his pen in rage and ordered the army to be mobilized immediately. The prince had to be saved at all costs, and his people responded with firm resolve. Meanwhile, Mr. Kim was sprinting away from the city, aware of the many pursuers hot on his heels. Strangely, once they crossed the city limits, the chase stopped. Just then, he heard a faint groan from Edward. Mr. Kim noticed he was awake. Edward, upon seeing who carried him, froze in terror. It was the man responsible for his death in another life. He stammered in disbelief, wondering if this was just a nightmare, then promptly fainted again. When Edward woke up for the second time, he began to ask how he had gotten there, but Mr. Kim cut him off, saying he wanted to know what was really going on.
Why was Edward even here? Edward's mind raced. Was this man after his secret, here to finish the job? Mr. Kim noticed the nervousness and reassured him, saying he was not here to kill him. Edward, skeptical, asked what guarantee he had. Kim simply said he did not know what kind of guarantee would satisfy him, but reminded Edward that he had already paid the price for their past encounter. Edward snapped back, accusing Kim of trying to kill all the traitors back then. Kim interrupted again, calling it unfair. He clarified that he had only killed Edward and his immediate men. General Lightning and the others had survived. Then Kim dropped an interesting point. Since he had disappeared and Edward had died, someone else must have taken all the credit, likely earning a promotion and living in luxury. That hit Edward hard. He had worked tirelessly, yet here he was, disgraced and powerless. In his mind, he cast aside his old name. He was no longer Eddie Mantola. From now on, he was Prince Edward of the Elwood continent. He confidently extended a hand toward Mr. Kim, proposing they work together. Kim shook it with a sly smile. Both men had the same thought. They would use each other. Edward suggested they start with what had just happened, and Mr. Kim recounted the events. Edward nervously pieced it together. This had been a murder attempt, and the crazy old butler must have been behind it. Kim was surprised by how casually Edward took the news, but the prince claimed he was used to it. Then he told Kim they needed to leave, but first they would celebrate his coming of age. This, Edward explained, was where the real story began. A story written 300 years ago, when Edward the Great, the first king of their dynasty, once stayed at an inn during a hunting trip in Camargo Forest. The service had been so remarkable that he granted the innkeeper the title of butler. From that day forward, the Canary butler family became one of the most powerful in the empire, thanks to royal favor. But if that favor was withdrawn, their power would crumble. This is why mobilizing the military was in the butler's interest. In the royal army, a mercenary quietly plotted to capture the prince and hide him among the soldiers before eliminating him. But his plan was shattered when someone announced the prince had already been found. The butler was informed and immediately demanded the prince be brought before him. Panic set in among the conspirators. The prince had arrived unexpectedly, and he was not alone. Standing beside him was Mr. Kim, carrying a huge pipe. The butler shoved through the crowd toward Edward, calling out to him with forced politeness, asking if he was all right. Edward, standing tall, replied that he had returned on his own. The butler tried to make a scene about saving him, but Edward ordered the soldiers to stand down. Then he made a bold claim. The attack had been planned for the following day, and he had survived only thanks to his new bodyguard, Sir Kim. The mercenary panicked, trying to twist the story, claiming the so-called bodyguard must have kidnapped the prince and forced him to say this. Edward's patience snapped. He scolded the man, demanding to know if he truly believed someone could force him to speak against his will. Declaring his full royal name, he reminded everyone he was the heir to the great Edward, and accusing him of lying was nothing short of treason. The mercenary shrank back under the prince's glare. The butler, meanwhile, studied Mr. Kim carefully. His armor might have been a bit worn, but the alloy of mystium in it was unmistakable. Armor Inspector Butler studied the fallen knight's body with a calm but sharp gaze. He admitted that he was impressed. From beneath the armor, scales glimmered faintly, the mark of Joe the Dragon. This was clearly no ordinary kidnapper. Realizing the truth, Butler stepped back. His expression hardened as he addressed the mercenary, declaring that there was no room for doubt anymore. Everything was now perfectly clear. In the next moment, Butler's voice echoed across the wall as he commanded the guards to seize them. Mr. Kim, watching from the side, was quietly impressed. Edward had been right all along. He even complimented Edward's way with words, and Edward, with a smug laugh, accepted it as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Within moments, the mercenary and his allies were captured, bound tightly and forced to kneel. The prince and Mr. Kim were escorted to safety. Edward, however, walked straight toward the traitors. Soon, the voice of their leader broke the tense silence. When the man raised his head, Edward saw the exhaustion etched into his face. This was no small-time criminal. He belonged to one of the 5 most powerful royal families in the world. Edward made it clear they possessed knowledge others could only dream of. Then, placing a firm hand on the mercenary's shoulder, he smiled in a way that promised pain. A cold voice from behind warned the prisoners not to think they could escape easily. The mercenary began to tremble, drenched in cold sweat. His mind raced. How had their perfect plan gone so wrong? It was then Mr. Kim stepped into view. He crouched until his eyes were level with the rebel leader, who blurted out a curse and demanded to know who he was. Mr. Kim decided it was time. Slowly, he lifted his mask. Beneath it was the unmistakable head of a bear. The mercenary froze, remembering that same bear who'd stopped the assassination of the prince in the royal chamber. The shock was clear in his voice as he realized the truth. Mr. Kim simply smirked, told him to have a nice day, replaced his mask, and walked away. The prisoners were no longer needed in public, so the guards dragged them to the dungeons where their confessions would be extracted, painfully. Mr. Kim, meanwhile, removed his old armor and belongings, all of which were coated in slime. It was the same slime he had absorbed from a slime monster, reshaping it into mystium along with treasures taken from a dragon's cave. That slime had been useful more than once on this journey, even helping him fool Butler earlier. Later, Butler revealed that during interrogation, one of the prisoners had spoken, calling himself Aniclimax, the messenger of death. Butler's voice grew darker as he wondered how someone like that had infiltrated the royal army and even joined the prince's personal guard. He then turned to Mr. Kim, asking if he knew anything about them. Mr. Kim kept to his plan, claiming he had only heard of Aniclimax from an old colleague, a night bodyguard. This revelation shocked Butler even more. Mr. Kim continued, revealing that the second queen, believed to have died of illness, had in fact been poisoned. The news stunned Butler. His shock turned to rage as he slammed his fist into the table, swearing he would kill the ones responsible. Before he could storm off with his sword, Mr. Kim stepped in, placing a firm hand on his shoulder and warning him that these were high-ranking officials, far from ordinary enemies. Butler demanded to know what Kim suggested. Kim calmly told him to step away from the matter, gently pushing him back into his seat and assuring him that this was no longer his concern. When Butler finally settled down, Kim claimed the situation was his to handle. Butler couldn't help but wonder what kind of power this man truly possessed.
Kim explained that even the prince knew the trail was leading toward him, so the matter would be resolved quickly. Butler agreed to leave it in his hands. As Kim left the room, Butler called out, entrusting the prince's safety to him. Kim raised a hand in acknowledgement, though privately he thought only to keep the prince alive for as long as he needed him. Later, Kim and Prince Edward sat together in a carriage headed for the coming-of-age ceremony. Along the way, Kim casually asked if there was any news on the mysterious group after Edward. The prince laughed and admitted he had lied earlier. He already knew everything about them, so there was no need to investigate. Kim, intrigued, removed his helmet and asked who they were. With a mischievous grin, Edward promised that once they reached the kingdom, Kim would meet their leader in person. The idea actually impressed Kim. The conversation then shifted. Edward brought up the status window, recalling Kim couldn't use it. Testing a theory, Edward used his recognition skill, but nothing happened. The prince pondered the issue until an idea struck him. He told Kim to change his form. Amused, Kim transformed his hand into a bear's paw, thinking of the time he had eaten in Alaska. Edward quickly stopped him, insisting on something more meaningful. This time, Kim changed his arm into that of another being. Edward used the skill again, and the status window finally appeared. He explained that recognition did not work in Kim's original form, but as soon as he transformed, it activated. Kim, now curious, decided to experiment further. He shifted into a lizard man's claw, then troll skin, even activating his fatal bite ability. And the testing didn't stop there. So Mr. Kim decided to make a few more changes to himself. Even his teeth transformed, now looking like hardened wolf fangs. That alone was wild enough, but the real surprise came when the status window finally started filling up with new skills. There it was, strength level, recovery level, regeneration level, resistance to bad effects, growth level, the works. And Kim thought to himself, why stop here? Let's throw in some red dragon parts too. But the moment he did that, Prince Edward, who was watching from the side, looked a bit uneasy. He nervously joked about how much Kim was eating. Curious, Edward checked exactly which monsters Kim had devoured so far. Then they decided, why not repeat the experiment? Except this time, nothing changed in the status window. That's when Kim froze for a moment thinking, wait a second, could it be that I'm the one causing a glitch in the status window? Days passed. The journey felt endless, but finally the carriage rolled to a stop. The driver politely announced that they had arrived. Both Kim and Edward stepped out, and in front of them stood the breathtaking royal castle. Edward turned to his friend with a serious face and asked if he was ready. After all, they were about to meet the leader of a certain group, and warned him not to be nervous when looking at this man. Moments later, they were standing before a massive door. A guard led them straight to the boss's chamber. Edward whispered that behind this door was the leader of the mercenaries. Kim muttered under his breath that this was going to be interesting. And then, the door opened. What they saw was shocking. The leader of the mercenaries was none other than the king himself. The mercenaries' mission had failed. The king sat with his head in his hand, clearly disappointed. Looking up, he acknowledged Prince Edward and Kim. Prince Edward knelt and introduced himself as returning from the Grand Continent. The king said he already knew everything and was relieved they were safe, though his tone carried a certain arrogance. Edward wasn't having it. He snapped that everything happened because of the king's entourage, though in his head he knew those so-called guards were really mercenaries. The air between them turned heavy. The two locked eyes and you could feel the silent tension. From the side, Kim was just watching, thinking these two might actually be worse than each other. Then out of nowhere, the king asked about Kim's name and confirmed it. In a low, serious tone, he announced that Kim's new title would be Secret Guardian Knight. The weight of his voice carried power. Maybe this was the legendary king's pressure, though Kim thought to himself that it didn't actually feel that overwhelming. The king then looked at Edward's knight and suggested giving him to the royal court. Edward instantly refused, saying he had two reasons. First, Kim was his friend, not some possession. Second, Kim was more than a friend, he was a brother. Kim grinned and agreed, and right there, in front of the king, the two started putting on a full brotherly display.
The king's expression turned red with anger, but he kept his composure and dismissed them from the chamber. Once outside, Edward popped open a bottle, thanking Kim in his own way, and joking about how the king must be stressing out inside. Edward then pulled out something special, armor with magical enhancements. This was his reward for enduring years of the king's training system. He explained how, since the age of 10, he had been collecting elite warriors, training them, and using them as spies and assassins for the royal family. Edward's voice grew bitter, as he admitted the system was actually his own idea once. Kim thought to himself that this was deep-seated hatred, but Edward softened slightly, saying that now he had a friend of unknown origin, and that was enough to keep the king uneasy. Before they could talk more, the door burst open and a girl ran to Edward, calling him brother. She scolded him for what he had done to their father, but Kim stepped in with cold authority, warning her about barging into the prince's private room without knocking. She snapped back in anger, but Kim calmly drew his sword, bringing it just close enough to her neck to make her freeze in fear. His voice dropped as he told her this was her last warning. She fell silent immediately. Edward rushed to her side, assuring her that Kim meant no harm and was only protecting him. She left, still shaken, and Edward muttered an insult under his breath about her. Kim asked if she was the sister Edward had mentioned before. Edward's face darkened. He revealed that Eleanor, the girl, was the fourth daughter of the king. 3 royal siblings had already died in the throne battles, and only 3 remained. She had been given a divine power by the goddesses, the ability to go wherever she wanted. Despite having different mothers, Edward and Eleanor had once been close, but now Edward's tone turned to rage as he explained that his own mother, the second queen, had been poisoned, and the one responsible for calling her to the place where she died was none other than Eleanor's mother. Mr. Kim glanced at Edward with a curious look and asked if the girl they'd met was from his mother's side. Edward's eyes lit up at the question. He reminded Kim of something, that the king himself had killed the second queen. Kim then asked softly why Edward's relationship with the rest of the family was so strained. Edward's answer was blunt, because his older brother had a hand in it. Standing up, Edward apologized, saying there were some things he could only speak about if that brother was present or if he gave permission. That surprised Kim.
Edward then pulled out a blue watch, saying he had made a promise to the goddesses themselves. Putting on the watch, Edward smiled and shifted the topic. Time to get to work. Kim followed, asking why they didn't deal with Mary first. Edward explained that she was inside the palace and couldn't be killed, which is exactly why she kept sending him away again and again. Edward remembered the day she was formally introduced to the people, but now things were different. He was officially an adult, which meant he could openly make a claim to the throne. With a slight laugh, he said she could no longer provoke him whenever she wanted. Then Edward's tone sharpened. There were still too many people supporting the king. They needed to win over the chancellor first. He looked at Kim, distracted enough not to watch his step, and suddenly bumped into someone. Edward fell, irritated, demanding to know who dared block a prince's path.